Good morning, and welcome to the 9th Annual Genetic Counselor Appreciation Day. I'm Sarah Pierzadeh-Miller, President of the National Society of Genetic Counselors, and thank you for joining us for one of my favorite NSGC traditions, a moment each year to reflect on how far we've come as a profession and to look ahead to the opportunities before us. This year marks an exciting transition from Genetic Counselor Awareness Day to Genetic Counselor Appreciation Day. While awareness of our profession remains important, this shift represents our growth, an evolution that celebrates genetic counselors for the vital work that they do every day. It also brings us in line with how other healthcare professionals are recognized and reflects the modernization efforts outlined in our strategic plan. Our live stream theme, the Evolving Genetic Counseling Workforce, captures the heart of that plan, advancing the role and recognition of genetic counselors and transforming NSGC for the future. Together, we're shaping how genetic counseling is practiced, perceived, and positioned within the healthcare system. Today is about celebrating our peers, educating others, and amplifying the impact of genetic counselors everywhere. We are vital members of healthcare teams, empowering patients and families with knowledge, compassion, and guidance to make informed decisions about their health. I'm thrilled to be joined today by three leaders who are shaping this next chapter of our field. We'll explore how technology, innovation, and advocacy are redefining our profession and how we can continue to grow, thrive, and lead. Dan Rakonda is a certified genetic counselor and program director of the Genetic Counseling Program at Baylor College of Medicine. He chairs the School of Health Professions Task Force on AI, has developed an international genetic counseling observership program, and has taught genetic counseling in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Dan is also active in professional organizations, including NSGC, and is a dedicated advocate for the March of Dimes. Kyle Davis is a genetic counselor and writer who serves as Assistant Director of Fieldwork for the Vanderbilt University Genetic Counseling Program. He has experience in clinical care, marketing, and science communications. And last but not least, Praveen Kaushik is a genetic counselor and commercial leader serving as Executive Director of Product Marketing at Veracyte. He has held roles in clinical care, counseling management, and product marketing. All right, so let's jump into this panel discussion, and we'll start with the state of our field. So across the field, we're witnessing both exciting progress and complex challenges in the genetic counseling workforce. Educational standards and professional competencies are, of course, evolving, and genetic counselors are stepping into new roles across clinical care, research, policy, and industry, among others. As NSGC works to elevate the visibility of genetic counselors as genomic experts, advocate for competitive reimbursement, and support the growth of a thriving, inclusive workforce, how are you seeing these changes take shape in your own work and career path? And I will kick it off with Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. When I think of how we've grown over the past 10 years that I've been a genetic counselor, and how I've seen that in my own career path, is I just look at kind of the roles that are available. When I started, it felt like it was primarily clinical roles, or maybe some clinical adjacent roles in the laboratory. And over those 10 years, I've seen roles grow into marketing, sales, business, and I've seen people become entrepreneurs, genetic counselors, hanging out their own shingle, which is really exciting. And also like working on clinical trials. So getting to actually do work that, making genetic therapies. So that's how I've seen our career grow in the last 10 years.
I just to tack onto that, I think that's perfectly said. And one thing I would add is I don't think it's surprising anymore to see genetic counselors in certain roles. When I graduated 14 years ago, I was surprised by some of the roles that a couple of GCs were in, but now I don't bat an eyelash.
Based on what we heard at the NSGC conference this year, I think we redefine the definition of genetic counseling, because we used to use the term traditional genetic counselor. There are a lot of other roles that don't even require us to call ourselves genetic counselors. And with that, we are opening up new areas of practice. And it's remarkable over the 37 years I've been doing this, the tremendous change that's taken place.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I think that was what was, I know last week at the conference, It was so much fun to have, so many trained as genetic counselors who are doing innovative clinical roles, but innovative roles in many other spaces. Like you said, all of you said, the idea of you don't have to be called a genetic counselor in the role to be a genetic counselor, usually using your tools and your competencies. So I'm going to bring us kind of to an adjacent topic, which is one big topic last week at the conference was AI and how it's impacting our field, and thinking about not only literacy in it, but also thinking about application and all of these types of things. So, Dan, I know that you're doing a lot of this at your institution. So how can we ensure that new technologies like AI and emerging technologies enhance rather than replace the expertise and empathy that define our field?
Great question. When someone chooses to become a genetic counselor, they recognize very early on in their careers that in their training that this is a profession that is that really the only constant is change. And what I mean by that is, how we practice and engage with patients is continually evolving. When we say genetic counselors are lifelong learners, we really mean it. AI is the latest in a long line of disruptive technologies that have the potential to improve patient care and change the way we practice and how we train our workforce. One of our students recently completed a thesis project where we queried patients who had received genetic counseling for a variety of indications. And when asked if AI should replace genetic counselors, thankfully, the overwhelming majority stated that human interaction is something that cannot be replaced by AI. And they did not want to see that element of genetic counseling go away. So with that in mind, it's incumbent upon us as genetic counselors to participate in the development of AI-related tools, to learn how to use them, when not to use them, and to explore whether their employers have policies on the responsible use of AI and what guidance or boundaries need to be established when considering whether or not to use AI-related tools.
Yeah, I don't think it can replace us. It's great to hear that there's data showing that people don't want it to replace us, but at the end of the day, it also cannot. It might be able to succinctly provide an answer to a question or even chat with you, but that I think the answer was in the question, Sarah. The empathy side is just never going to be able to replace. And so as long as we lean into it and accept that it is something that's coming, I think it's going to be doable to work alongside.
Yeah, and I would just add, we are we have a lot of genetic counselors working right now in clinic, in commercial roles. These tools are being rolled out. If you have a seat at the table or have a representative at the table who can understand the shortcomings of AI, but also its strengths and benefits, limitations, then it can be thoughtfully integrated. I don't think there's going to be a chatbot that does what we do, in a year or 5 years or 10 years. And I don't think that that's what patients want either. But some of these tools might really help us, and we need to just understand them. And one example, at least from my own work, is I'm working on a research project where we're trying to see if an AI-assisted chart abstraction tool can do chart review. And imagine the questions you can ask of genetic counseling notes, of genetic counseling interactions. If you can, instead of reviewing 50 or 100 charts, you can do 5,000. So there's a lot of potential, but I think it's up to us to help shape it and to be at the table to help do that.
So perfectly said, all three of you. I love it. And it actually feeds really nicely into kind of an offshoot question from a couple of themes here that you all just spoke on. So being at the table, right? That's been a big theme. And I know I've been beating that like a drum for all year. What opportunities exist for genetic counselors to take on new leadership roles in, we were just talking about policy, data science, global health, like just, and we'll kind of do a quick lightning round from each of you in the next minute or two on thoughts on opportunities for leadership roles in these spaces for genetic counselors.
Speaking from the sort of industry corporate side, I think the opportunities are endless. And so as long as we are willing to just try something new, develop a new skill set, not get too caught up in I have to stay in one specific lane. As long as we have that mindset, what I have seen on the industry side is the opportunities are endless. Rather than focusing on the title or what our training allows us to gain as a title, focusing on the skill set creates those opportunities.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think we're going to see a lot more roles open as we discover more of the biology, kind of how things flow from DNA, which we are specialists at. But you think about the RNA, proteomics, precision oncology. These are all growing areas. They will continue to grow, and we are the right people to be in a lot of positions to help that growth happen. And there's going to be leadership roles in those areas too.
When you talk about leadership, I think one of the things we are good at and should continue to do is leveraging resources that are available to us, like faculty development if you're at an academic institution. And also, when opportunities arise, we often have to think about what season of life am I in? Is this the time for me to take on that role or not? We need to know when to say yes, when to say no, and when opportunity knocks, be prepared to challenge ourselves. Don't get too much in your comfort zone. And ultimately, for many of us, I know for me personally, I remember very clearly a statement made by a previous president, do something that scares you. And I think to some extent, if you don't challenge yourself, you may get into a rut and you may not have the same degree of satisfaction. And certainly I've felt that way throughout my career.
Oh, I love that. It's funny that you said that, Dan, because that speech very much inspired parts of my incoming address last year too. So I love that. I think that's such an important theme. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk more about how we sustain and grow. So building a sustainable, inclusive, and inspired workforce is essential to NSGC's future. And while our profession faces real challenges, from evolving expectations to increasing demand, which can result in burnout, certainly, we're also seeing new energy, innovation, and collaboration across the field. So from each of your perspectives, what are the most important steps organizations, training programs, employers can take to foster belonging, personal growth, and long-term fulfillment for genetic counselors? And I'll kick it off with Praveen.
Yeah, I think this kind of builds on the previous question, which is around that opportunity. And so when I think about genetics, to me, there are really two key things that makes this so exciting. One is the science itself is just growing at such a rapid rate. And so that's just exciting because there's always going to be someone we have to explain something to as things just get more and more complicated. But then on the other side of this, as the types of roles we take expand, it just will show that we can pretty much fit in anywhere. And so as long as training programs are sort of setting up new genetic counselors or even existing genetic counselors to gain the skill set in both those lanes, whether it be roles or just the newest science of it all, I think we'll be set up for success. The thing that half the time people are surprised that I'm a genetic counselor at the tables I sit at. I have to tell them, I am a actually certified genetic counselor, and they're always taken aback, like, I'm surprised you're sitting here. And it's forced me to think about what did my program give me that I leverage every day, and it's the ability to communicate clearly complex topics to a variety of people, if you will, and recipients. And so as long as we're continuing to focus on that, I think that is our superpower, is communication. I think we'll be setting people up for success.
To piggyback on what Praveen just said, one thing that definitely resonated with me during this past year's conference this year is the recognition that we have transferable skills. And from a training perspective, by leveraging communication skills, the practice-based competencies, and other tools in our toolbox, we are now seeing genetic counselors in industry, pharmacogenomics, variant curation, research, and a variety of clinical settings. Training programs do not need to reinvent the wheel, but they do need to adapt by incorporating tools like AI, by inviting speakers to introduce their learners to new areas of practice, and to continue to solicit feedback from alumni and employers and graduates to use that feedback to stay abreast of the trends and utilize the opportunities for training, not just for those that are in programs, but continuing education for those that have been out of programs as well.
Yeah, no, very well said. And, when I think of the personal growth part of it, once you're in a program or in the profession, I think it's incumbent upon us as leaders to listen to the people, whether those are our students or whether those are our team members or colleagues, to help them grow, I think, in the direction they want to grow. So, they may have a project they're passionate about, or they may have, a thesis idea that they're passionate about. And so allowing people to follow that passion, I think is really helpful to feeling like they belong on the team, in the program, and to achieve what they want to achieve, and really feeling that inclusive belonging that we all hope to feel in our professions.
Yeah, incredibly well said by all three of you. And I feel like that kind of leads nicely into another element of like thinking about that long-term fulfillment and kind of a long, hopefully happy career, which is thinking about resilience in the face of uncertainty. We have lots of moving parts this year, lots of things happening that are very much out of our control. And I know I talk about this with people quite a bit. I'm curious from the three of you, how you think genetic counselors or those trained as genetic counselors can cultivate resilience to better serve themselves and their patients, especially as we think about so many of our incoming genetic counselors into the field. I mean, most of our profession is quite young, I'll say, we lean that way. And so just folks that maybe haven't seen, as many things over the years in terms of ebbs and flows of how things can go. So I'm curious what you think about cultivating resilience as you think about going into your career and sustaining through your career.
If I can jump in,
Mm-hmm.
I've been in oncology pretty much my entire career. The idea of jumping to something like pediatrics is terrifying right now, right? Something happened and all of a sudden I have to move to pediatrics or prenatal. But I forced myself to think about that as a doomsday scenario. And I think we have to stay curious. We have to accept that, hey, we were trained to do this. Will the learning curve be steep? Yes. But we were trained to do this. And as long as we stay curious and know that you can go outside of lanes that you've built for yourself, I think that's the best way to cultivate that resilience.
Yeah, I would say, you have a network. We all have networks. And even, there's obviously the people we talk to the most, the colleagues and friends we know the best, but there's also lots of other people out there that are in our network that are further out. And so I think resilience can come from them helping you, realizing that people are there to send you to a friend who's hiring or a friend who knows something or another colleague. And then also just, I think, a lot of programs have classes on self-care and about kind of thinking about yourself as a growing professional and to lean back on some of those skills, because resilience also comes from, not getting burned out and having other avenues to be who you are. So for me, that's writing. I also like to work out. So, I try to stay physically active, but I think you can be resilient in your career while, maintaining things that happen outside your career.
Yeah, to follow up on what's already been said so well is, resilience is actually something we look for in applicants to programs. If you've been through a trial or tribulation, you're more likely to be able to adapt to the unexpected. Life happens outside of program, outside of work, and work-life balance is a phrase that we often talk about. What can you do to improve your resilience, to take care of yourself while still providing the services you need to provide to your patients if you're on the clinical side? And if I think back to when I first came into this career, we were all expected to be jack of all trades. And I'll get rid of the expert at none, because I think that perhaps undervalues the ability to adapt and enter into many different practice areas. And I've had that privilege over the course of my career to work in a myriad of different positions. And that has helped me as a training program director, where I feel like I have some skin in the game and some knowledge to be able to help that next generation incorporate the skills and tools that will help them to do the same in the future.
So well said. Thank you all. And now we'll think towards, as we're talking about students and programs, we'll think towards where we're headed. So across the country, genetic counselors are driving change, as we know, from expanding access to services and mentoring the next generation, as we were just talking about, to advancing research, innovation, and advocacy efforts. NSGC's work alongside Faegre Drinker, our consulting firm, remains crucial, particularly with the imminent reintroduction of the Access to Genetic Counselor Services Act, which, now that the government literally reopened last night, should be in the coming days, which will be great. More to come. Looking ahead, what do you see as the most exciting opportunities to strengthen our profession's impact, whether through education, policy, technology, or collaboration across healthcare systems? And I will kick it off with Dan.
Great question. I think the CMS bill, as it's affectionately known, is an extremely important piece of the puzzle. As we move forward in opportunities for genetic counselors, billing and reimbursement is critical, and improvements in that area. Also looking at how we adapt to the changing landscape and opportunities that genetic counselors can potentially put themselves in. So as we think about what our future goals, to really become essential elements of and essential members of the healthcare team, to the extent that we are a resource to the other providers we serve with, and also a resource to policymakers. And those being at the table is the theme that we talked about a little bit earlier. That's critically important.
I don't think I have anything to add. That's a great answer.
I was trying to think of how to add to that, and that was perfection.
I was told that I should probably show my tie.
Yes.
Stop copying me. It's a genetic tie. It was actually given to me by some students, but anyway.
It's also where we're headed, more genetics ties.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. Genetics paraphernalia all over
Yeah.
the place. Well, to kind of add to that just a little bit, as we're thinking about those exciting opportunities to strengthen our profession's impact, I'm curious what you all think about particular partnerships or advocacy efforts that will be most important in the years ahead. I know we talked a little bit about billing and reimbursement. Dan touched on that really nicely, which I couldn't agree with more. That's huge for our profession's sustainability. Any other thoughts, Praveen, Kyle, as we think about partnerships or advocacy efforts that are going to be the most important to prioritize as we go forward?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, in thinking about the Access to Genetic Counselor Services Act, I think working with and continuing to build the relationship with the ACMG and AMA will be really helpful. We need everybody, including the many organizations that I think, I'm going to say the name wrong, Faegre Drinker has partnered with. And that, goes from large organizations like the ACMG and AMA to our administrators at our various institutions, and then our patients and the, many groups out there that are patient related, because we need this foundation of support to do the advocacy, both for the bill, but also just for the profession, and to continue pushing forward.
Yeah. And so I that was going to be part of my answer. So that was awesome, Kyle. The one thing I would add, especially from an industry perspective, is I can't speak to whether this is still the case, but definitely when I graduated, I had limited myself to what I thought was available to me on the industry side. There's only a handful of labs, for example, that would make sense to hire a genetic counselor. And what I've learned through my career is that is not the case. So I don't know if this fits within partnership advocacy, but some sort of way to further educate all the opportunities that live beyond your traditional labs today, because genomics really has infiltrated every corner of medicine, I think would be really cool. And in that same vein, if we're going to go further from an industry standpoint, what about further upstream from a care standpoint, which would be primary care? Is there anything that could be done there to advocate for genetic counselors just to get to the point of contact that exists for most of us?
The only other thing I might add to what's already been said is partnering with like-minded organizations and identifying those organizations that may have comparable interests and leveraging those relationships to foster policy change, to foster improved awareness in other professions about genetic counseling. Our work is never done. We are often advocating for ourselves, and there's still far too many people who say, genetic counseling, what's that? So I think that is a continued and ongoing task for us as a whole to work towards better understanding and awareness. And that's perfect for the day in which we are talking about appreciating the work we do.
Oh, very well said, all three of you. And I want to do a quick last lightning round on a personal anecdote. So many of our advocates are inspired by personal experiences in healthcare, of course, whether their own or those of loved ones. And I'm curious if you don't, that's okay too, but would anyone like to share a quick moment or a quick story that has shaped your passion for the field of genetic counseling? And I'll just kick it off just to start somewhere with Kyle.
Yeah, I remember a case when I was working in the laboratory, and we would do support for providers or patients who got the testing. And I was talking to a grandmother who was taking care of her grandson because the parents weren't able to, and they got a diagnostic finding, and we were just talking about these results. And I just remember this was a neurodevelopmental risk copy number variant, multiple people affected in the family. And I just remember her saying like something to the effect of, oh, now I know what's going on. It always felt like I was fighting something invisible. And so that moment of recognition that what she experienced was real and true, and that there was an explanation based in science and medicine. And it felt like a moment where she kind of redefined, her whole life, really, of like my children and my nephews and nieces and brothers and sisters, and now this all makes sense. And so I think I take that, and I know that happens every day, hundreds of times a day, maybe thousands of times a day across the US and the world, where people are getting those answers that help them not just understand, what's a better medicine, what's the right therapies to do or not do, but also just really shapes how they understand and interact with their family and themselves. So that's always been something that's been impactful for me, thinking about and kind of how can we have that happen more often, and how can we help people? And that's kind of one of the things that drives me is those types of interactions.
Mine's going to be a little bit sillier than that, because I'm slightly odd. Anytime I get in an Uber and the Uber driver is particularly chatty, if they ask me what I do for a living, I play a little game. Half the time I will say some kind of corporate jargon, right? Product marketing, head of marketing, I work at a lab. And the other half of the time I'll say genetic counselor. And I've been keeping a mental tally of how people react to these two things. And when I say genetic counselor, the conversation is hands down always more passionate and interesting, because people either say, whoa, what's that? And then it leads into this amazing discussion. Or they say, whoa, I actually have seen a genetic counselor. I know what you guys do. And it's so positive. I've literally never had a negative reaction to the silly game. And to me, that's just a fun self confidence thing that shows that this is a really cool profession to be a part of.
The thing that comes to my mind is many individuals who know me know I've been very involved in advocacy, licensure, government-related affairs, if you will. Some years ago, I was advocating on behalf of March of Dimes in the state of Florida. And they had this big tobacco settlement where they were looking for smoking cessation funds to be put out into the community. And I met with a legislator, and proposed that, hey, they need to have smoking cessation programs for pregnant women. It was not included in the original proposal. So after the day was over, I'm driving home. I get a phone call from that legislator saying, I've added the amendment for smoking cessation to be added for pregnant women. And it wound up passing. And I think the moral of the story there is, we get frustrated with advocacy when things don't go our way. But when you get a win like that, when something like that happens because of you're in the House and in the space to advocate with a legislator and it makes a change, to me, that has made every failure I've ever had in advocacy worthwhile, because those wins mean so much. And if without advocacy, those things wouldn't happen.
I love these stories. This is how I wanted to end this. These are the impact points. Like, this is why we do what we do. And it just makes my heart happy to hear all of these amazing wins. And I know we are at our time. And so to think about how are different ways that we can all celebrate Genetic Counselor Appreciation Day, I have a few ideas for everybody. First of all, spread the word. Visit the Genetic Counselor Appreciation Day toolkit on NSGC's website under Education and Events for flyers, videos, sample social posts, and a lot more. And also celebrate your peers. Share photos of your team. I know lots of folks are very good at that on social media using hashtag I am a genetic counselor and hashtag Genetic Counselor Appreciation Day. And patients out there, if a genetic counselor has made a difference in your care, we would love to hear from you. Share your story and tag NSGC. We've already heard of a couple of those examples right here today. And watch for yourself and your colleagues. If you shared a message at our NSGC annual conference, you might be featured in today's post, so you never know. Check it out. Also, join our social media trivia hour from 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time today. That will be a lot of fun. And finally, don't miss our special webinar today, 12 noon Central Time. Check the comments for the registration link. And I'll close by saying happy Genetic Counselor Appreciation Day to everyone. So excited to be here with all of you. And thank you to all of our panelists for a wonderful discussion today. Way to kick off the day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.